Hey, what's going on guys? I'm ensnare here. Today we are back for another Protect deck profile. And this time it's a different one. Today we'll be covering on Darkface Gredora. Now, I know I've covered Gredora before on the channel, but that was about a year ago, and I'll tell myself, given the current state of V, given, so many things has changed, why not we actually go back and review this deck? Which is something I do, but just not for every deck. But I decided, since, I do like Gredora, I might as well just put in some time to do it, especially since we are currently in the middle of the Shaman King Desert, so let's check it out. Gredora is one of the last few G bosses in G, and rightly it also became the last Megacolony boss in V before V's end. Strangely though, she was not the original G boss. That is actually the role of Darkface. But to be extremely fair, nobody likes Darkface, or at least there's only about 7 people on the planet who actively do, and I can name you 3 of them, who are great people I've met online, but yeah, they're not going to be the majority of the people who actually promote Megacolony. But I'll tell you what does sell: Mama Gredora. So today we're actually going to be covering it. This list is going to be a lot different from the one I covered a year ago. The one I covered a year ago was much more gimmick based in terms of beatdown and trying to cheese your opponent out in one way or another. We're gonna go back to real basics of Megacolony for this video, especially when it comes to the mechanic that Gredora is actually centered around in V, which is of course the Cradle. So before we actually move on, I need to discuss what is a Cradle. A Cradle is a marker that you can install on your opponent's rear guards, 1 each per unit. Okay, so basically when you Cradle one of your opponent's rear guards, its power drops to 0. It loses its original power, so goes to 0. It loses skill, and it cannot boost, cannot intercept, it can attack. So if you give a Cradle power, your Cradle can still attack. So that's pretty good. But there is one more catch about the Cradle, despite being just a little soft removal. When a Cradle dies on your opponent's side of the board, as long as it's sent to the drop zone, you can actually search your deck for a grade of the card that was killed and add it to your hand. So I give you an example. Let's say my Cradle was cradled onto a grade 3. Okay, let's say there was a Cradle installed on my grade 3, and let's say the unit dies alongside the Cradle, right? So that means that I get to search my deck for any grade 3 card of my choosing and add it to my hand, just like that, for free. Of course, the conditions tied to the fact that the unit has to be killed and sent to the drop zone. So if the Cradles are bounced back to hand, if the Cradles are placed in your damage zone, if the Cradles are placed literally anywhere else, it's not the drop, sent back to the deck, and any form of removal of the Cradle, you are not getting this search effect. So just keep that in mind. But, I mean, yeah, that basically means that the Cradle has some very bad matchups. But against most people who don't have an active raid to remove it, it is pretty taxing, and it can grind games a lot more. Unlike Malkuth, who was focused more on the whole self-harm grinding aspect of, oh no, everybody let's get on the board, let's intercept, let's hurt myself, let's pull them back. Gredora is much more focused on a more traditional Megacolony lockdown. Just putting all your opponents into a very tight position and just advancing with your children forward. So that's basically the premise of this deck. And of course, as you can probably guess, the goal is to get as many Cradles on your opponent's board as possible. Whenever a unit appears, we want them Cradled ASAP, so that we can start to plus and get benefits of them. And then you may say, but that means you have to have Cradles, right? What, can the opponent just not call? I mean, even if they do not call, the few cards that you do get to Cradle are going to benefit you, especially because they're keeping these units in hand. And if they're keeping these units in hand because they're not calling them, that means you can just continue to beat them down much more easier, and they can pose less aggressive threats to you. Like I said, there are active matchups that you will lose as a Gredora player, such as stuff that's pretty obvious, like Grand Blue, because you're not going to have anyone to Cradle, stuff that bounces the Cradles back to hand, like Nubatama, Bermuda Triangle, stuff that puts your Cradle damage zone, Angel Feather. But more rather than not, you will still have a chance against a large number of decks, especially decks like Gold Paladin, where if they don't use Agloveil, they are pretty much effectively dead. Agloveil, Agravane, they're effectively dead. So yeah, let's actually take a look at the deck now that I've spent a lot of time discussing the premises of the deck as well as the mechanic. So it's going to be pretty fast, you can guess. Our grade 3 lineup, we play 4 copies of Darkface Gredora, 3 copies of Healthy Mice, and 2 copies of Darkface. This grade 3 lineup is a lot smaller than what I used to play, because Gredora is a very grade 3 heavy deck, right? So where are the grade 3s? No, they're right here. And honestly, that's all you need now. Gredora has 2 skills. Once per turn, activate on the Vanguard Circle, counterblast 1, and you install 2 Cradles. So she is the unit that gives the most number of Cradles for the lowest cost. So that's why she's the boss monster, right? And then when she attacks, you retire one of your own rearguards, search your deck for a grade 3, superior call it. She and the newly called unit get 10k. So it's a pretty cheap and fundamental, multi-attack. You sack with your own, replace it with another grade 3. Pretty good. So you may be saying, cool, I can now 2-box every grade 3. What option do I have? One of your options is Hell Demise. When placed on the rearguard circle, Hell Demise chooses one of your own rearguards and stand it, and chooses one of your opponent's rearguards and rest it. Calling this on a normal turn makes absolutely no sense, you just call, and then I stand a unit, but you already stood and drew all, so you're like, what? If you're playing stuff like machining, yeah, that kind of makes sense, because you put all your rearguards at rest for your own cost, and now you're standing back up to join the fight. Think of it like Beast Deities. So we say, okay, that's understandable, have a good day. But what's the real point? With Gredora, this combos off that you call this card during the battle phase, which means you can actually use this resend skill as an extender for multi-attack, which is really good, by the way, considering it's all free. Of course, its last skill is that as long as this unit exists in a column where all of your opponent's rearguards are at rest, they cannot be stood. So I'm pretty sure that's what the skill says. So yeah. Anyways, I barely use the skill, so I'm not really sure. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I can't exactly remember. But then again, if you're using the skill, it means you haven't cradled enough, which is why. Speaking of skills that I actually can do, and that's obviously going to be Darkface. Yeah, that's his name, Darkface. When placed, discard a card from your hand, choose one of your opponent's rearguards, and install a Cradle. So this is a discard 1 for a Cradle 1. But as you remember, the Cradle will break open and give you a new card. So it's effectively like a cycle 1 with a tad bit of spot removal. Okay, that's fine. Second skill is when he attacks, you counterblast 1, choose one of your opponent's Cradles and eat it. So basically you kill it and you place it in the drop zone. This unit gains 5,000 power for each grade of the card that you kill. It has to be a unit that has been cradled, so you cannot opt to just set one like as a normal retire. You have to destroy a Cradle. You gain power based on the grade of the unit that you have eaten, but the higher the grade, the more likely the less the shield. So it's another trade-off, but if you do just want to get rid of a unit that you suspect your opponent actually should not be having on the board, that's good. For example, if your opponent has a force marker underneath a Cradle, you just don't want the Cradle to swing at you, period. Eat it, it's fine. So this is really more of a bit of a tech, because if you see the rest of our deck, especially the grade 2 lineup, you actually do want Cradles present on the board. So then it comes to the question, when do you actually sack the Cradle and when do you actually not sack the Cradle? I'll leave it to you to decide, if you're actually considering playing this deck, you make the call. When do you actually need to? It's very situation based, but the fact that we do have this option is good. Moving on to our grade 2s, we play 4 copies of Stamping Red, 4 copies of Sticky Bolus, and 4 copies of Nymphomas. I'm going to break it down real quick. These two have the same skill, V or R. If your opponent has a Cradle, it gains 6k. Really good magic numbers, I enjoy it. This one has a skill when placed on V or R, you counterblast 1. You either install a Cradle or you draw a card if you cannot Cradle. Really good for its straightforwardness. It's a draw or Cradle. I enjoy that. It's definitely value whichever part of skill you're using, and the fact that it has a free magic number is good, especially on the turn 2 turns. Nymphomas is a bit different though. Nymphomas is when this unit is retired by one of your card's effects, which is obviously going to be Gredora, right? Then you Soul Blast 1, choose one of your opponent's units and Cradle it. So it's a bit of a delayed Cradle in the sense that you don't get to use it immediately like Nymphomas, like a Stamping Red, but Nymphomas uses Soul Blast, which is a different cost than the rest of your deck, which is alright. It puts taxes on a different resource, that's fine, and it actually makes your retires with Gredora make sense. It actually helps give purpose to units you just sack off. You can now just actually put in a Cradle, which is cool. And you can choose not to use it until you actually need to, which is another added bonus. So now that I've addressed those two, I can move on to the last one, which is obviously Sticky Bolus. Sticky Bolus has 2 skills. When placed on VRR, Counterblast 1, look at the top 6 cards of your deck, add up to 2 different cards with Darkface in their names, and add them to your hand. Now, Gredora counts as a Darkface, as well as Darkface himself. So you essentially get to search for these 2 cards from the top 6. You can whiff, and if you whiff, you pay the cost for nothing. So just keep that in mind. Second skill is, when his unit attacks on a rearguard circle, Soul Blast 1, she gets 6000 power for each Cradle on your opponent's rearguards. If her power exceeds 21,000 or more, you draw a card. Wow, Burst has made its way into Megacolony. I like that. But beyond that, any form of power she gains is going to contribute to this 21,000 power, including boosters, skills, not just her own. It's just that she comes with her own built-in power skill because of the Soul Blast cost and whatnot. You have to pay the Soul Blast to get the power first, then the option to draw. So you can't just draw even if she's already at 21,000, but you don't pay the Soul Blast. So just keep in mind that's how it's phrased. It's a pretty good card, it's a great beat stick. It's not like the other two where they only gain 6k as a continuous skill. This is 6k for every Cradle. So this card can get pretty big, and it's good draws, so it's great. Of course, you can use it multiple times, but the powers are to end of battle, so you can't actually stack this if you want to withstand it. But you do get multiple draws and a big beater. Drawback, it costs soul, so just keep that in mind. Moving on to our grade 1s real quick, or should I say grade 3s. We play 4 copies of Little Dorcas, 4 copies of Butterfly Officer, and 4 copies of High Class Moth. Dorcas is your traditional grade 3 searcher, which is pretty good. It got reprinted, but I'm playing the original because I have it. It has a skill though, which is if all of your opponent's rearguards are not in the standing position, he gets 5000 power on VRR. So that's just a good thing to take note of for its condition. Butterfly Officer has a skill. When placed on the rearguard circle, rest his unit, choose one of your rearguards, he gets 10,000 power. At the end of the turn, move into the soul and counter charge one. So for exchange for a small body, a body you're not even going to get to use, you get to give your unit 10,000 power and it dies to recycle your soul cost as well as a counter charge. Which is pretty good, even if you don't get to move the unit to soul, you still get to counter charge. So you could effectively just sack the unit that you're given the 10,000 power to with Gredora. You don't get to move into soul, but you will get the counter charge, which is cool. I have to say though that the 10,000 power is really effective, especially in combination with the multi-attacks, because you get to use the 10,000 power effectively twice. And if you combine with stuff like Sticky Bolus, it's already pretty devastating. So just keep that in mind. This is a really good option for Megacolony. I understand that there's some people who are not fans of this card, but I think for what it serves as, this is pretty much quite a good card for me to run. But if you'd like to talk about more counter-charging options to last you through your very long and grindy games of using Gredora, here is one of the newer cards to Megacolony, High Class Moth. He has 2 skills. In the soul and in the deck, he counts as a grade 3, which means you can actually search him out with Gredora, you can actually search him out with stuff like Little Dorcas, which is really good, by the way. It's like, whoa, you get consistency on a card like this. It's cool. It's really cool. Of course, the grade 3 soul condition is meant to serve a much different purpose, which is obviously if you want to soul blast grade 3s, you can soul blast him out as well. But I mean, to be honest, we don't do that in this deck, so you won't really need that. But I really like the deck function. I think that's cool. But if you use him in other decks, like stuff like Venom Stinger, stuff like Gunning Tolengo, I think it's great. Well done. Second skill is rest this unit. Choose one of your normal units, place it at the bottom of your deck, counter charge 1. Your opponent's unit cannot intercept this turn. This unit can only be using its skill once per turn. So you can have multiple copies of this card because you have consistency, but you only can use 1 copy of it once per turn. Which sucks, but then again, we need to make Megacolony not that good, right? But then again, this is just amazing. You get to refill your deck with options. Options that you either filled out with Cradle, options that you either filled out with Gredora, and you get put it back. So if you, let's say, use up all your copies of Hell Demise, not to fear, put it back, let's load it again. It's just that good. I know it's only once per turn, which really is a pain, but just having that option to just gateway your units back to the deck, to toolbox, I can't complain more. And it's a free counter charge on top of that, which is that, as you can see, needs a lot of counter blast. So I'm grateful. It's really good. Of course, our grade zeros, we play 4 normal heals. We don't need to play heal guardians because we do actually want counter blast early. We play 8 crits with 4 crit sentinels, making that a total of 12 crits. Gredora filters the deck. Gredora really puts the opponent down and lockdown. You don't need another PG. You don't need more, especially when you use Protect 1. It's illogical to use Protect 2. So that means you can focus the rest of your trigger slots on aggression, because Gredora may grind the game out, but you're going to need to close the game, right? That's what the crits are for. Of course, you play your starter. So that pretty much is it for this Gredora deck profile. Very, very simplistic deck. No major gimmicks, no OTK, no secret combo, nothing. Very standard beatdown grind. And that's what I really enjoy about it. Especially when V has gone a lot slower and much more open for, you know, different stuff to be used. I feel that Gredora has a chance. I'm not saying Gredora is going to be a big dog or anything, or Megacolony is going to be great in general. No, not in the slightest. But what I am saying is that there is options, there is now viability to playing decks like this. You know, last week I showed off Malkov. This week I'm showing off Gredora. So I just want to bring in more options, especially because people are looking at VCall, they're looking at the format and saying, wow, you know, the format has changed. Indeed it has. And that means all the decks that didn't shine as well or straight up died, you know, they have potential now, which is great. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you all next time. Stay safe. Goodbye.